This is Julianne Condia, host of Rewritten. Thank you so much for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Madeline, host of Crowned and Dangerous here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you are done with this episode, I hope you'll come back to check out my show, Crowned and Dangerous, where Jessica and I talk about our time in the pageant world. A new show comes out bi-weekly on Thursdays. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Crowned and Dangerous. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Welcome to Beauties and Headcanons, where we're nerdy and you probably are too. This is Lindsay, and I'm here today with Emily and Elisabeth, and we're here to talk nerdy to you. So the newest season of Doctor Who just began last month, so we're a little bit behind, but we really wanted to do something really cool this week. And so the three of us all watched the first episode to this last season within the past 24 hours. And we wanted to talk about it a little bit because it's a really cool start to a really cool season. And something different happened this season, so we wanted to talk about that.
This episode is brought to you by Squadcast. As you guys know, we've been using them for the past couple of months, and it really streamlines recording our episodes remotely. With this simple browser-based tool, we can log in wherever we are and record, and the files are simply downloaded to the host computer. If you're interested in recording, Squadcast has a free 14-day trial to give it a whirl to see if it's for you. Just go to squadcast.fm and sign up.
Okay, so there's a lot to talk about. I don't know where we all stand as far as how much of the previous Doctors we've seen. So I know that we've talked about how we all have different favorite Doctors. I very recently decided that I think my favorite might be Capaldi, simply because he really speaks to my love language, and I know that I've watched all 3 seasons of him. So, Elisabeth, Emily, what have you guys seen?
Well, I started with 9, and I've gotten a little bit into 10. I actually got right up until just after Martha leaves. So, like, that last episode when she leaves the doctor is pretty much where I've stopped off. And I actually, when I started watching Doctor Who, like, I'm the kind of person where I go on and I, read a bunch of stuff and I look at. So, like, I pretty much knew, like, who the Doctors were. I knew, like, the general gist of everything. And I thought up and down, like, oh, Tennant is going to be my favorite because it's David Tennant, and I love David Tennant. And I actually contemplated, like, just skipping ahead to him. But I'm like, no. If I'm going to do this, I got to do it right. And, of course, when I started watching, I was really glad that I didn't skip 9 because 9 has actually ended up being my favorite. It was totally unexpected. He just kind of wormed his way into my heart and has just kind of made a home there. Like, nope, I'm not leaving.
Aw. I ended up being a little different than that. Like, I started watching Doctor Who not knowing really what to expect as far as, like, whether any Doctor is going to be a favorite of mine or not. I knew that David Tennant was a later Doctor. And so for that reason, maybe he kind of was predisposed to my mind. But I watched from 9 all the way through, I think the second last season of Capaldi. And so far, it's been David Tennant the whole way.
Okay.
I was really annoyed. I think I've told you guys about this before. I was really annoyed when I saw the first Matt Smith episode because I accidentally missed the transition. And I was like, no, what happened? So that predisposed me to not like Matt Smith very much. But I ended up liking him okay in the end. And Picaldi, he's doing a really nice job. From what I've seen from him so far. And I also recently saw the episode where he figured out why he chose the face that he regenerated into, which was really cool. So that was cool to see. But then I also did watch a couple episodes with Jodie Whittaker as the doctor. And we'll talk about my thoughts on her too.
That's the plan. Yeah. So I'll be honest. I think about 3 or 4 years ago, I started to binge watch all of the Doctor Who episodes, and it was back when Aurelia, who's now 11, was 6 or 7 years old. So I she talks about certain episodes she wasn't allowed to watch. Like, I didn't let her watch The Angels. I didn't let her watch a lot of Dalek and Cybermen stuff going on. But she definitely loves Matt Smith the most. And I always liked Tennant the most as well. So we always had that kind of duality to us. You know, she loved Matt Smith. I loved David Tennant. It was okay. But I also think that she maybe got to watch a lot more of Matt Smith as opposed to watching so much of David Tennant.
There was a lot of the David Tennant episodes, especially towards the end, that had a lot of Dalek in it.
Yeah, so I won't fault her for that. But, you know, when we did go to the Maker Faire here in Milwaukee, I definitely let her sit in a couple of Dalek costume robots that were built and all kinds of other cool stuff. So she definitely understands what they're all about. And so it's a really good mix of things. But what I love the most about Capaldi, and unfortunately neither of you really, well, I mean, Emily, you do, but there's a very different aspect to each Doctor. You know, I've read a lot of different articles about, you know, what Matt Smith represents and what David Tennant represents, what Chris Eccleston represents, and what Capaldi could represent. So, of course, those articles were prior to him actually taking the role. And I'm interested to see where they want to take Jodie Whittaker, but I'm excited at the same time. So we know that the Doctor has 12 regenerations, which means 13th Doctor is the last one. This should be the last generation, and it's the first female, which I think is really important. But also, I don't want to detract from the fact that, you know, we're very women's power and yay women, but there's also something to be said about the fact that the Doctor has been traditionally a male role and traditionally done in a very paternal way, to say the least. So there's a couple of the last episodes that I really wanted to focus on, because we definitely want to talk about Jody and the transition there. But the last episode that I did get to watch was that Christmas episode from last year that I thought was really cool. They brought in, what was that actor you said, Emily?
The guy who played Filch from Harry Potter. I forget his name. He's also in Game of Thrones.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yeah, he's the guy that lives at the towers, the bridges.
Okay. And of course, I didn't even know that. I thought that he was the first Doctor. I was like, how did they get this ancient guy to come out from the woodwork?
I know. I'm like, is that guy still around?
Right,
He looks good for being ancient. Yeah. I was very impressed with how well they duplicated the first Doctor.
And I just loved him. I loved how patriarchal he was and how old-fashioned he was and so stiff, and females take a secondary role, and it was very cool to see that in that episode, because it's a very cool transition. There's a part where he makes a joke about how, aren't all women made of glass? And Bill looks at him and she's like, oh, are they? And I don't know if you guys know, but Bill is a female, and she's a lesbian, and she is the last partner to Capaldi in the last season. So she's a very out, lesbian female, and she's just amazing, and she's so fun. And she really does not like it when the first Doctor says that. She is not going to have any of it. Because she is kind of, I feel like she's very, women can do whatever they want and they can be with each other and all this other stuff. So I think it's really cool that they made this kind of statement, but it's sort of very opposite of where the first Doctor came into being in the BBC in the television era.
I think it's interesting that they brought in the first Doctor and kind of put those two different opposites right next to each other.
Right.
Kind of displayed how different things are compared to where the show started and where it's become
and how much
now.
Transition there is between the Doctors too, because Capaldi's Doctor keeps saying, oh, no, you can't say that. Oh, no. And the first Doctor says things like, oh, it's just very stiff things that you just don't say now.
Old-fashioned.
Yes, old-fashioned.
Yeah, very old-fashioned things.
And Capaldi is like, nope, you can't say that, and you absolutely cannot say it to anybody. The first doctor then says, well, who says? And he goes, just about everybody you're going to meet for the rest of your life. You just can't. So it's very cool to see that transition, but also that they are stuck in where they are at that time because they both don't want to regenerate, that they both refuse. They both make this decision that they don't want to. So, I mean, we probably should have made a huge disclaimer, spoilers on this entire episode.
We can do that.
But I also feel like it's very important to note, like, that there's that similarity between the two of them, but there's also this really cool concept of how the people that have made an imprint in your life are, they travel with you. And so there's this concept in that episode of the Testimony Foundation is this thing where they're able to freeze a person right when they're near death, and they can be extracted from their time streams, and then their memories are duplicated, and their selves basically return to the moment of their dissolution without pain or knowledge or recognition of what's happening, and they can walk among us again. So, and then kind of see this happen a few other times in Capaldi's storyline, but this is like the culmination of that. So they talk about this is heaven on New Earth. This is where you don't die, you kind of live forever. But Capaldi has this really, he has a problem with the idea of living forever. He thinks that, you have to have an end. There's an end to everything. And the last few episodes of his, I want to say time stream, but that's not quite right. The last few episodes of his timeline, he struggles with the fact that it's the end. He knows it's the end, but then he refuses to end because he's got this unfinished business. So it's really neat because he has to transition through death and acceptance of death. And he has this pilot who sort of helps him along that process. There's a lot of death talk and a lot of rebirth talk and a lot of talk about how the people who you met in your life become a part of you and they continue on with you. And Jodie Whittaker even kind of carries that on to her character in the first episode too. She says that she's had a lot of friends, she's had a lot of family, and they stay with her. They stick with her.
I really liked how when Jody makes her first appearance, like, she's surprised at who she is because she hasn't seen herself yet. And everybody's like telling her, "Oh yeah, you're a woman." I'm a what? And then she's just kind of doing things as instinctually as she can because she's become a completely different person. And by the end of the episode, she finally it's like, "Oh, I know who I am now." And she realizes it and explains to the alien, I forget what they're called, but explains to the alien who she is, and she is a very distinct doctor from the other doctors. And she brings this really awesome energy and presence to the role. And it's not like she takes herself really seriously, but also doesn't become somebody she's not
right
in the process.
It's serious, but it's also kind of light. It kind of,
yeah.
Obviously, I don't have a whole lot of experience with a bunch of different doctors, but it kind of felt like a callback to Tennant in kind of a way. So I kind of wonder if, the further we go on through her tenure as the doctor, if she will kind of once in a while take on different aspects of some of the different doctors, possibly.
I want to kind of go back to something Lindsay mentioned earlier, because last year, when Erica and I were still doing the show, we talked about a couple of Doctor Who theories, and one of them was that the most recent actors to portray the Doctor were going through the stages of grief. And so then the last stage of grief, which Jodie Whittaker would be portraying, is, and we don't know if this is a for sure thing or not, it hasn't been confirmed by anybody, but she would be portraying the acceptance stage finally coming to terms with what the doctor has done, because this comes from after the war doctor. And so, the stages of grief, all 5 of them.
So the 5 stages of grief are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So Capaldi would have been depression.
Following from that theory, I'm interested to see if that's kind of how they are trying to portray her as playing the doctor, like finally accepting all of who the doctor ever has been all at once.
Well, and I do feel like there's a bit of that even in the first episode where she speaks about knowing that she's a traveler and she sees there's wrong and she does what she can to fix it. And that kind of a culmination of that almost. I'm not sure about depression being Capaldi because, like I said, I feel like he's much more my love language and very much more someone that I can relate to. As far as we know so far, he's River's, the end of River's timeline, and he spends an extended period of time with her, which is just amazing. And when Capaldi changes into Whitaker, the wedding band falls off of his finger, and there's a very solid feeling to that event.
That's interesting because I didn't actually see that part. I saw about half of the episode that happens in, and so I didn't actually get to see the transformation.
It really shook me. Like it really got me.
It sounds very interesting. Like it's kind of like a Capaldi was one person and Whitaker is a new person, and so that marriage is no longer a thing. Like it's no longer a bond.
But at the same time, she definitely states that you are a chronicle to all the people you've met and all the people you've lost. And Capaldi is he's very adamant about how he's so sick of losing people, and he's so sick of, can't he have rest? Can't he have peace? And the people that are in his life, like Nardole and Bill, and he even sees Clara, he says, like, you guys are just my memories. And they're like, but that's enough. That's enough to continue with you. And I mean, I've lost a few people in my life, and they've been instrumental parts of my life. So I kind of like that idea. I kind of like the concept of those people continuing on with you. And so the doctor, having had such a long time stream, having had so many people in his life, Martha and Donna and Penny and everybody, it's, can't forget Amelia. And I mean, there's so many people that have shaped just the timeline we know. And, we haven't even watched previous to the Ninth Doctor. So I feel like that weight is something super heavy, and that's weighing on Capaldi. And it's interesting to hear Whitaker talk about it, but also not really address that weight so much. So it's almost the acceptance thing might even fit. It might even be right there on top of it, where she really accepts that this is her role and that this is what the doctor does. I'm not even sure.
And I remember, I think it was in the first episode with Whitaker as the doctor, and somebody died in that episode, and they asked her, how do you deal with grief? And how do you deal with losing someone? And she said, I just keep that person and their memories a part of me. And whatever, I try to think about what they would do in certain situations. And I try to keep in mind their, her favorite memories with them and that sort of thing. And I'm like, that sounds like someone who's at peace with her past.
Right, exactly. There's an element to each time that the doctor regenerates and is trying to find out, even remembering, Whitaker tries to remember her name, can't remember who she is. And I don't remember how much of that is part of the regeneration with Tennant to Smith or Smith to Capaldi. I feel like there's always an episode or two where they're getting to know who they were. I think it even took longer with Capaldi, and they might have even made jokes about it being because of his age or something. I'm not even sure. We don't start out with Eccleston at the beginning of a regeneration, so that might just be energetic crazy the entire time. I'm not really sure, but there is a certain energy and forgetfulness and spunkiness to Whitaker that kind of even sort of worried me because, like I said, there's a lot of female empowerment going on, I feel. And I'm worried that the naysayers would say something about Whitaker's spunkiness and forgetfulness would be more womanly than anything. And so I wanted to throw that out there just because I wanted to talk about it with you guys. Do you think that's a concept, or is that kind of just like a regeneration thing that the Doctor does, that it's always kind of like ooh, who am I and what am I doing and who am I and all of that? Do you think that's kind of a theme, or is it possible that it's more of a Whitaker thing?
Well, I've only seen one regeneration, which was from Eccleston into Tennant. I remember from his that he was very out of sorts, and for him it was more physical. And I think that was likely because of the circumstances of his regeneration. For a lot of time, for a long period of time, after he finally regenerated, he was just sleeping because he was trying to, just sleep through everything that was happening. And I think possibly because Jody had to wake up and deal with things, possibly that might have interrupted the process a little bit and kind of prolonged it.
But it also kind of gives it an element of women get things done. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. Kind of like I've got all these plates spinning in the air, and regenerating is just one of them. I'll get that done when it gets done, but I also have these other things to take care of. So I'm going to do that while I do this other thing too.
I think she even kind of says that in the episode. I think she even kind of says something similar. Yeah.
Does she? I don't remember. We'll get this all figured out because, we'll get it done.
I think she even says and it's a very interesting thing too. She might not exactly say that, but it's very similar. She ends up saying something like, "Oh well, what about the bigger questions? Okay, because there's little, and that's whatever. But what about the bigger questions?" And so she says, "You could wait, and we could work on this and have better answers if you just chill out for a minute." And they go on to go fight that. I think she keeps making jokes about Tim Shaw. That's not how you say it. Yeah. But she makes fun of the alien and she says, Tim Shaw? I love all the accents as well. I feel like it's very quick, choppy, even like sayings where she says little adjectives are cut out of things that she says when she, when you see things, when you see needs doing, as opposed to when you see things that need to get done. It's if you want something doing, you do it, but she doesn't continue the quote. She just says, if you want something doing, that's it. And I just loved it.
I like that. Mm-hmm. But she adds a particular, almost like a sass to it, but not. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool elements to her transition. And in true Doctor style, there's some cute little quips and cute little things that she says, they talk about, we need to take you to the hospital, but they say the initials of the hospital. And she says, "Oh no, I never go anywhere. That's just initials." It's hilarious. I love it. I was laughing. It was so good. And, they talk about, she says something like, that's very poignant for the entire episode, for the entire regeneration, where she says, we're all capable of the most incredible change. She's talking to that alien who has done something against the rules to get higher on in life and to get a new position. And she says, we can evolve while still staying true to who we are. We can honor who we've been and choose who we want to be, and still be who we're planning to be by making the right decisions. And there's a very amazing theme to Capaldi where he talks about, they talk about him regarding goodness, and goodness really is choosing to do the right thing, even though there's no witness, even though there's no reward, even though there's no one to see you do the right thing. It's doing the right thing, even though. And I feel like that's exactly what we need in this time right now, with everything that's going on around us in this country and other countries, in our backyards and our neighborhoods. It's important that we all do good and that we try to strive to do good and to have those that we love do good with us and for us as well. I just love it. I'm just so excited.
I watched the most recent episode that came out a couple days ago or earlier this week. And I watched the very first episode of the Whitaker season. So he's in, I think, the next 3 or 4 episodes at least. So he does stay for a while. Not sure exactly how long, but he'll stay for a while. He's great.
I kind of like these companions. I think they kind of complement the Doctor really well. They're pretty diverse, and they all add something different to the whole.
No, I really agree. It's interesting. Well, it was really interesting the way the first episode started.
I'm
like, I want to know like exactly what the issue is with him.
It was, I can't remember what it was.
Did I miss it?
It's a basically like a coordination disorder.
Yeah. Okay. Because I was watching it with my kids around, and I was probably like not paying close enough attention or something. But I caught the important stuff. It was just that one. Like,
yeah, I do like how they write these episodes and how they make it so that at the very beginning you think that that person who's talking and who's doing the monologue is talking about the Doctor, and it ends up not being about the Doctor, where Graham ends up talking about his nan. And I think that's just like so fun to see that there are these instrumental people that we lose in episodes, but that, you know, still stay with us and can be just as good as the Doctor is.
So I think that is one way to quote unquote subvert expectations, but to do it in a good way, as opposed to, you know, subverting expectations by doing the opposite thing and then just kind of
we should kind of expect that from Doctor Who episodes at this point, where we know we're going to be surprised whether we like it or not. And this episode was definitely a pleasant surprise for me.
Yeah. I think it was really, really well put together. And also interesting too, because it was like even the way that the monster alien was, it threw them for a loop for a little while. And, you know, all of the scenarios that everyone came up with were pretty plausible until they actually figured out what was really going on.
I like the role that like each of them played, because, you know, obviously, you know, you have Yaz, who is, you know, police officer in training. And so she's wanting to, like, you know, get to the bottom of things and investigate.
Yeah.
And oh crap, I just forgot his name. Ryan, yes. And he is just like, you know, just very curious, and, you know, he also kind of wants to figure things out, but like, you know, he's a little bit more, I think, casual in that regard. And then of course Graham is just like, why are you doing all of this? Like, he's kind of, I think, the voice of reason, and I think that's why I like him so much, because I think that's what the majority of like normal people would react in that situation. Like, why is she running toward the alien? Why are you running toward the alien?
There's always a character who follows, and there's always a character who's like, wait, what?
Actually thinking about what's going on and saying, this does
it's
not
like when you're
seem to
watching
add
a
up.
horror movie and you know that person shouldn't go up the stairs if they want to get away, but you still watch them do it anyway, and there's usually someone following them as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And Graham also reminds me of a character that, Elisabeth, I don't think you have met yet, because he is Donna's grandfather. So I think you haven't met him yet, but once you do, I love him. He's great. So that's who Graham reminds me of a little bit.
Clara has that character too in Danny Pink. So
yes, that's true.
It's a very it's the stable character who wants to see some kind of logic behind everything that's done, and really doesn't understand the adventure seeker.
Yeah, so I take that back a little bit, because Donna's grandpa is the one that kind of goes along with whatever the Doctor says, and Donna's the one that's like, why would you do that?
Right. But she's there with him, and that voice of reason too. So but
her grandpa is just great though. So Jodie Whittaker is trying to figure out what she should call her like group of companions, because she's like, oh, team, no, that wasn't quite right. Gang, no, fam, and I'm like, really? Would you?
She said fam, and I was like, yes, it is your fam.
It just sounds so weird coming from her for some reason. And then she tries it again in the other episode I watched, and it did not work. She tried that first, I think, and they were like, really? You did that?
I do love it. It's
great.
Fantastic.
Yes. So like that's her showing her more fun-loving side. But when they're down to business, like she's down to business, and it's so good.
I really like how this new doctor is like personality wise. Just, even though, obviously she's recovering from regenerating and everything like that, like she is basically just following all these instincts, and she's tapping into this knowledge that, she probably doesn't even truly understand or know how she just has it. And she knows she needs to use it. And it's just this kind of drive that, she doesn't necessarily know about, but she just knows that she has to do this, instead of just, oh, well, okay, I'm fine, so I'm going to go now.
Yeah. Well, I love the way she kind of explains what a regeneration feels like. I don't think any other doctor has done that. She describes it as being like, you want to hold on to who you were, but you have this really strong urge pulling you toward who you're going to be. And I love that explanation for it, because it also kind of applies to regular people too. It's just not as dramatic going from, an entirely different person, but as we develop in our lives, like that happens to us too.
And then she also went on to describe it as, just that moment right when you are absolutely sure you're going to die, and then you're born.
Yeah.
And,
I love that.
I mean, that's going to be so intense. Like, even if like, okay, I'm going to regenerate and, I'm not actually going to die, like, still.
That can be terrifying. Like, because what if it is the last regeneration and you didn't know
not
it?
Necessarily. There's mixed information out there from Doctor Who canon itself as to how many regenerations are possible.
I suppose that's true. That's true. But then, like, especially since there is mixed canon, like, who knows if there is a specific number
or not?
Well,
the very first time, I actually looked it up because I remember reading something about it in one of my geek groups. So I looked it up because, I'm curious about that kind of thing. And from the information I found, there are 3 separate canon answers. The very first one from season 6 in 1969, the episode The War Games, the answer is indefinitely. So that was the very first answer, and how many regenerations there could be. The second was in season 14 in 1976 with the episode The Deadly Assassin, and that was where 13 was established. And then in Sarah Jane Adventures in 2010, A Death of the Doctor, he gives 507.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that was David Tennant, right?
So yeah, like at this point, who really knows? And I mean, really with the writers, anything is possible. I mean, we've seen long-standing series, just totally retcon some things just for convenience sake. So, who knows what they might end up going with just because, we want to keep writing,
There are people, though, who have also said that if they go beyond the original 12 regenerations, so 13 lives, that they're not going to continue to watch it because they're, those kinds of fans. So, yeah.
Oh, I see.
I can understand that as well. I mean,
I see.
I feel like, even as Capaldi said, all good things must come to an end.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I don't think series should go on forever, but, at the same time, I kind of like to see what they might do just because, you feel that you have to stop at a certain point doesn't mean you really have to. There might still be some more story to tell. So, I don't think it should be necessarily set in stone, just more like, okay, I think we've reached a natural endpoint, so this will be the last one.
Yeah, exactly. And since it's been such a long-standing show, like, it's so interesting that, the way that they're taking it now, because it started in the 50s or 60s, right? And then they've just taken it so long, and everything has just developed throughout the whole timeline of the show. It's Like, I really, really wish that they had all of the episodes so that the people who jumped in the middle could go back and watch.
The second Doctor and the third Doctor.
I really want to know what that scarf doctor is like.
I'm sure it's amazing.
Anyways, I believe that's all we've got on the Doctor, but we would love to hear from you guys what your thoughts are about the transition from Peter Capaldi to Jodie Whittaker. If you have similar impressions as us, different impressions, go ahead and talk on our Facebook page. We'd love to hear from you. And that is something that we want to be doing a little bit more, be more active in. So go ahead and hit up our Facebook page. With that, I'm Emily.
I'm Elisabeth.
And I'm Lindsay. And thanks for getting nerdy with us today on Beauties and Headcanons.